Hello, dear friend, and welcome to this quiet corner of history. Tonight, we set aside the noise of the present and wander gently into the stories of the past. Whether you're curled up beneath the blankets, resting after a long day, or simply seeking calm company for your evening, I'm grateful you've chosen to be here. If you'd like, share in the comments where in the world you're listening from. I always love seeing how far this community stretches across time zones and continents. And if these soothing journeys through history bring you comfort, consider subscribing so we can meet again. For now, let's loosen the weight of the modern world and step softly into the echoes of yesterday. Tonight, we explore something unusual, something that dwells in the borderlands between documented history and the landscape of human imagination. We speak of the Vatican, that ancient seat of spiritual authority rising from the heart of Rome, and of the Anunnaki, those mysterious figures who stride through ancient Mesopotamian texts like gods descending from distant heavens. These two subjects seem separated by vast chasms of time and culture, yet they have become curiously intertwined in modern speculation, woven together by threads of wonder, conspiracy, and humanity's eternal questions about our origins and purpose. Let us begin not with conclusions, but with curiosity. Let us walk slowly through the gardens of what we know, pausing to admire the flowers of historical fact before we venture into the wilder forests of speculation. For in this journey, the destination matters less than the walking itself, and the questions we ask may be more valuable than any answers we claim to find. Picture, if you will, the Vatican as it stands today. That tiny sovereign state nestled within Rome, barely 100 acres in size, yet containing within its walls centuries upon centuries of accumulated human aspiration. The great dome of St. Peter's Basilica rises against the Italian sky like a prayer made solid, designed by Michelangelo himself in his later years when his hands had shaped enough marble to understand the architecture of the divine. Beneath that dome, the bones of Peter the Apostle are said to rest, the fisherman from Galilee who walked with Jesus and was called the rock upon which the church would be built. But the Vatican is more than a church. It is a library, an archive, a gallery of unimaginable treasures. In the Apostolic Library, manuscripts sleep in climate-controlled silence, their pages holding languages that most of the modern world has forgotten. Latin texts from the early Church Fathers. Greek philosophy preserved by Byzantine scribes. Medieval illuminated manuscripts where gold leaf still catches the light after 800 years. And beneath these known collections, in the secret archives, now renamed the Apostolic Archives to dispel some of the mystique, rest documents that chronicle nearly 2 millennia of church history, of papal correspondence, of theological disputes and political maneuvering, of excommunications and reconciliations. The very existence of these archives, with their restricted access and their shelves stretching for miles, has long stirred the imagination. What secrets might hide in those documents? What knowledge has the Church accumulated over its long centuries of influence? The Vatican has witnessed the fall of empires and the birth of nations. It has negotiated with kings and emperors, with Charlemagne and Napoleon, with Columbus seeking funding for his voyages and Galileo seeking vindication for his observations of the heavens. It has condemned and it has canonized. It has burned books and preserved them. In this context, it is perhaps natural that people have wondered what else the Vatican might know, what else it might have discovered or suppressed or hidden away. And when we turn our gaze to the ancient world, to those civilizations that preceded Christianity by thousands of years, we encounter mysteries that have never been fully explained, gaps in the historical record that imagination rushes to fill. The Anunnaki emerge from the clay tablets of ancient Mesopotamia, from the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers where humanity first learned to write, to build cities, to organize complex societies. The word Anunnaki appears in Sumerian texts dating back more than 4,000 years, and its meaning has been debated by scholars for generations. Some translate it as, those of royal blood, or, princely offspring. Others suggest, those who came from heaven to earth. In the mythology preserved on these tablets, the Anunnaki are powerful beings, sometimes numbered at 7, sometimes more, who descend from the heavens and shape the affairs of early humanity. The oldest references to the Anunnaki are frustratingly brief and fragmentary. These are not the detailed narratives of Greek mythology, with their elaborate storylines and character development. Instead, we have lists of divine names, ceremonial invocations, fragments of cosmic genealogies. The Anunnaki appear in creation myths, in the Babylonian epic of Enuma Elish where they witness the great battle between Marduk and Tiamat. They appear in the Epic of Gilgamesh, that ancient story of friendship and mortality and the flood that nearly destroyed the world. They are judges of the underworld in some texts, celestial administrators in others. What did the ancient Mesopotamians actually believe about these beings? This is harder to determine than you might imagine. We are reading texts that were already ancient when Alexander the Great conquered Babylon. We are translating languages that died out millennia ago, trying to understand worldviews fundamentally different from our own. The Sumerians, the Akkadians, the Babylonians who inscribed these tablets did not think in the neat categories we use today. Their cosmos was alive with divine presence, with gods who were both transcendent and intimately involved in daily affairs. The boundary between natural and supernatural, between human and divine, was more permeable than our modern sensibilities allow. Into this ambiguous landscape of ancient belief, modern interpretation has ventured with varying degrees of care and credibility. In the late 20th century, a writer named Zecharia Sitchin published a series of books that would profoundly influence how many people thought about the Anunnaki. Sitchin, born in Azerbaijan and raised in British Mandate Palestine, claimed to have translated ancient Sumerian texts that revealed an astonishing story. According to his interpretation, the Anunnaki were not mythological beings at all, but extraterrestrial visitors from a distant planet called Nibiru, a world that allegedly follows a long, elliptical orbit through our solar system, returning every several thousand years. In Sitchin's narrative, these alien Anunnaki came to Earth hundreds of thousands of years ago in search of gold, which they needed for some purpose related to their home planet's atmosphere. Finding the labor of mining too arduous, they genetically engineered a worker race by combining their own DNA with that of early hominids on Earth. This worker race, according to Sitchin, was humanity. We were created, he claimed, not by divine fiat or evolutionary processes alone, but by extraterrestrial genetic manipulation. The Anunnaki became the gods of ancient mythology, and all the stories of divine intervention in human affairs were actually accounts of interactions with these advanced aliens. This is, to put it mildly, a controversial interpretation. Mainstream scholars of ancient Near Eastern languages and literature have thoroughly debunked Sitchin's translations. Professional Assyriologists, those who dedicate their careers to studying ancient Mesopotamian texts, have pointed out that Sitchin's readings of Sumerian often bear little resemblance to what the texts actually say. His claims about Sumerian astronomy, about references to a 12th planet, about genetic engineering, are not supported by what the tablets actually contain. Michael Heiser, a biblical scholar who spent years specifically examining Sitchin's work, demonstrated in meticulous detail how Sitchin's translations were either mistaken or invented. Yet Sitchin's books sold millions of copies. They were translated into dozens of languages. They sparked television documentaries and spawned countless imitators and elaborators. Why did these ideas resonate so powerfully with so many people, despite their lack of scholarly foundation? Perhaps because they offered an answer to questions that have always haunted humanity. Where did we come from? Are we alone in the universe? What is our purpose? Sitchin's narrative, whatever its factual deficiencies, provided a story that made people feel connected to something vast and cosmic. It suggested that our origins were neither random accident nor mysterious divine plan, but something in between. Something almost comprehensible, involving advanced technology and genetic science that echoed our own emerging capabilities. And this brings us to the curious connection with the Vatican. As Sitchin's theories gained popularity, other writers and researchers began weaving the Vatican into the narrative. If the Anunnaki were real, the reasoning went, and if they had shaped early human civilization, surely the Catholic Church, with its ancient roots and its vast archives, must know something about it. Perhaps the Church had discovered evidence of these extraterrestrial origins. Perhaps this knowledge was hidden in those restricted archives, suppressed because it contradicted Church teachings about creation and humanity's place in God's plan. The speculation branched in many directions. Some claimed that the Vatican possessed ancient Sumerian tablets that had never been published, tablets that contained the true history of human origins. Others suggested that the Church had encountered evidence of extraterrestrial contact during its long history and had classified this information at the highest levels. Still others wove together threads from different conspiracy theories, claiming that the Vatican was part of a global network that controlled humanity's knowledge about its true origins, suppressing information to maintain power and religious authority. It is worth pausing here to consider the nature of conspiracy theories themselves, not to mock them, but to understand their appeal and their structure. Conspiracy theories often arise in response to real feelings of powerlessness and confusion. The world is genuinely complex, and powerful institutions genuinely do keep secrets. Governments classify documents. Corporations hide unflattering research. Religious organizations have, throughout history, sometimes suppressed information that challenged their authority. The Catholic Church's treatment of Galileo is a historical fact. The existence of the Vatican's secret archives, with their restricted access, is undeniable. So when someone suggests that the Vatican might be hiding information about human origins or extraterrestrial contact, they are building on a foundation of plausibility. The Church does have ancient documents. It does have information that is not publicly accessible. And it has, in the past, been involved in controlling narratives about humanity's place in the cosmos. The leap from these facts to the claim that the Vatican possesses evidence of the Anunnaki may be unwarranted, but it is not incomprehensible. Let us walk more carefully now through what we actually know, separating verified history from speculation, not to dismiss wonder but to ground it in something more solid than rumor. The Vatican's relationship with ancient texts and archaeology is long and multifaceted. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, as European powers expanded their influence in the Middle East and as archaeology emerged as a scientific discipline, the Catholic Church was indeed involved in excavations and the acquisition of ancient artifacts. Vatican scholars studied cuneiform tablets. They translated ancient languages. They were part of the broader European intellectual project of recovering and understanding the ancient world. Some of these activities were admirable examples of historical preservation and scholarship. Others were more complicated, entangled with colonialism and the often problematic practices of removing artifacts from their countries of origin. The Vatican museums today house objects from across the ancient world: Egyptian statuary, Greek pottery, Etruscan bronzes. And yes, among their collections are cuneiform tablets from Mesopotamia, though nothing in their published catalogs suggests anything resembling Sitchin's extraordinary claims about the Anunnaki. The Vatican Library's manuscript collections are indeed extraordinary. Among their holdings are some of the oldest surviving Christian texts, biblical manuscripts from the 4th and 5th centuries, correspondence between popes and emperors that shaped medieval Europe. Scholars who have accessed these archives, and many have, as the restrictions are about preservation and capacity rather than absolute secrecy, report finding exactly what one would expect: church history, theological documents, administrative records, diplomatic correspondence. Not evidence of extraterrestrial contact or ancient genetic engineering. But what of the nature of the apostolic archives themselves? Why were they called secret for so long, and what might still remain unexplored in their depths? To understand this, we need to step back into history and consider what the Vatican has been throughout its long existence. The Vatican as we know it, as an independent sovereign state, is actually quite modern, established by the Lateran Treaty of 1929 between Pope Pius XI and Benito Mussolini. But the papacy's temporal and spiritual power is ancient, stretching back through countless transformations. In the early centuries of Christianity, before it became the religion of the Roman Empire, the Church was a persecuted sect, meeting in private homes and catacombs. The bishops of Rome gradually emerged as figures of authority, but they possessed no kingdoms, no armies, no great libraries. This changed with Constantine, the emperor who converted to Christianity in the 4th century and whose support transformed the faith from marginal movement to imperial religion. Suddenly, Christianity had access to resources, to buildings, to power. The Bishop of Rome became a figure of political as well as spiritual significance. As the Western Roman Empire crumbled, as barbarian kingdoms rose and fell, the papacy endured, providing continuity in a fragmenting world. By the medieval period, the popes wielded extraordinary influence. They crowned emperors and deposed them. They called crusades that sent armies across continents. They negotiated treaties and settled disputes between kingdoms. And all of this generated documents, records, correspondence. Every papal decree, every diplomatic letter, every theological ruling was copied and preserved. The archives grew organically over centuries, accumulating layer upon layer of documentation. The term secret in secret archives was never meant to imply conspiracy in the modern sense. It derives from the Latin secretum, meaning private or personal, referring to the Pope's private archive as opposed to public documents. But in an age of increasing skepticism toward institutions, secret acquired more sinister connotations. The Vatican, recognizing this, officially renamed them the Apostolic Archives in 2019, though the change did little to quell speculation. Access to the archives has always been restricted, but not in the way conspiracy theories suggest. Scholars can request permission to examine documents, subject to various rules about preservation and copyright. The archives are simply too vast for casual browsing. They contain approximately 53 miles of shelving, with documents dating from the 8th century to the present. No single person has read everything in the archives. No comprehensive catalog exists. Some sections have never been systematically examined by modern researchers simply because there are not enough scholars with the necessary language skills and historical background to work through everything. This vastness itself invites speculation. If no one has read everything, how can anyone definitively say what is or is not in there? This is a logical point, but it cuts both ways. The absence of evidence is not evidence of presence. The fact that something could theoretically be hidden in an archive does not mean it is hidden there. And everything that has been examined by researchers, thousands of documents, from multiple periods, has proven to be exactly what one would expect: church business, theological disputes, historical records. Moreover, we must consider the practical difficulties of maintaining a conspiracy of the sort often alleged. If the Vatican possessed evidence of extraterrestrial origins or ancient genetic engineering by the Anunnaki, this knowledge would have to be known by someone, by multiple someones across generations. Documents would need to be maintained, understood, their significance recognized. Yet throughout centuries of political upheaval, of popes who conflicted with each other, of leaks and betrayals and reformations and counter-reformations, nothing resembling such evidence has emerged from credible sources. The Catholic Church has weathered scandals and schisms. It has seen antipopes and reformers, has expelled and excommunicated thousands. If such explosive information existed, it seems unlikely that in 2,000 years, with so many people having access to church archives at various levels, With so many disgruntled priests and bishops and cardinals throughout history, not a single credible leak would have occurred. Secrets of far lesser significance have escaped the Vatican's walls repeatedly throughout history. Yet the speculation persists, and perhaps this is because it satisfies something deeper than mere curiosity about historical facts. The notion that the Vatican might possess secret knowledge about humanity's origins taps into profound religious and philosophical questions about authority, truth, and belief. Christianity, like all religions, makes claims about ultimate reality, about humanity's origins and purpose and destiny. The book of Genesis describes God creating humanity from the dust of the earth, breathing life into Adam. This narrative has shaped Western civilization for millennia, influencing everything from law to art to science to ethics. When alternative origin stories emerge, whether from evolutionary biology or from ancient astronaut theories, they challenge not just specific doctrines but entire worldviews. For some believers, evolution and faith coexist comfortably. The Catholic Church itself has acknowledged that evolution and Christian theology are not necessarily incompatible, with Pope Pius XII in 1950 stating that there was no conflict between evolution and Catholic doctrine, and later popes reinforcing this position. But for others, any challenge to a literal reading of Genesis feels like an attack on faith itself. The Anunnaki theory, in its modern form, presents a different kind of challenge. It does not explain human origins through impersonal evolutionary processes but through intentional design by advanced beings. In a strange way, this parallels religious narratives more than scientific ones. There are creators in this story, beings with intention and power. But these creators are not God in the traditional sense. They are technological rather than transcendent, physical rather than spiritual. This creates a peculiar tension. If the Anunnaki created humanity, what becomes of God? Some who embrace ancient astronaut theories attempt to reconcile them with religion by suggesting that what ancient peoples called gods were actually these extraterrestrial visitors, and that behind even the Anunnaki might be some ultimate divine reality. Others see the theories as fundamentally incompatible with religious faith and embrace them precisely for that reason, as an alternative to what they perceive as restrictive religious dogma. Where does the Vatican fit into this landscape? As the guardian of Catholic doctrine, as an institution built on 2 millennia of theological tradition, as a spiritual authority that has shaped Western civilization profoundly, the Vatican represents something that ancient astronaut theorists often position themselves against. If the Anunnaki were real, if human origins were technological rather than divine, the Church's teachings would be fundamentally undermined. From this perspective, it makes narrative sense to suggest that the Vatican would suppress such information if it existed. But let us turn the question around. Would the Catholic Church really suppress evidence of extraterrestrial contact or ancient genetic engineering if such evidence existed? To answer this, we need to understand how the Church has actually responded to discoveries that challenged its teachings. The story of Galileo is often invoked as proof of the Church's hostility to inconvenient truths. Galileo Galilei, the Italian astronomer and mathematician, defended the heliocentric model of the solar system, the idea that the Earth orbits the Sun rather than standing still at the center of creation. This contradicted the prevailing Aristotelian cosmology and certain interpretations of Scripture. In 1633, the Roman Inquisition tried Galileo, found him suspect of heresy, and placed him under house arrest for the remainder of his life. This is a genuine historical black mark on the Catholic Church, an instance where religious authority sought to suppress scientific findings. But the fuller story is more nuanced than the simple narrative of science versus religion. Many within the Church supported Galileo's work. Jesuit astronomers made observations that confirmed aspects of his findings. The conflict arose not simply because Galileo challenged geocentrism, but because of complex political and personal factors, including Galileo's combative personality, his mocking of the Pope in published dialogues, and theological disputes about the interpretation of Scripture. More importantly for our purposes, look at what happened afterward. The Church's position on heliocentrism gradually shifted. By 1758, the general prohibition against heliocentric works was dropped from the Index of Forbidden Books. In 1822, the Church allowed the printing of heliocentric books. In 1992, Pope John Paul II acknowledged that errors had been made in the Galileo affair. The truth eventually won out, even within an institution often portrayed as implacably opposed to change. Or consider evolution. When Darwin published On the Origin of Species in 1859, it sparked enormous controversy. Many Christians saw evolution as incompatible with faith. Yet over time, major Christian denominations, including the Catholic Church, found ways to accommodate evolutionary science within their theological frameworks. Pope Pius XII, as mentioned earlier, stated that there was no intrinsic conflict. Pope John Paul II went further, describing evolution as more than a hypothesis. Pope Francis has affirmed that evolution and the Big Bang theory are compatible with Catholic faith. This pattern suggests that the Catholic Church, whatever its past errors, has demonstrated a capacity to eventually accept scientific findings even when they initially seem to contradict traditional teachings. If credible evidence of extraterrestrial contact or ancient genetic engineering existed, would the Church really suppress it indefinitely? Or would it, after initial resistance perhaps, find a way to incorporate the discovery into its theological understanding? The Vatican, in fact, has engaged seriously with the question of extraterrestrial life. In 2008, Father José Gabriel Funes, director of the Vatican Observatory, gave an interview to the Vatican newspaper stating that belief in extraterrestrial life does not contradict Catholic faith. He noted that the universe is vast, and it would not be surprising if other intelligent beings existed. He even suggested that such beings, if they existed, might not need redemption through Christ if they had not fallen into sin as humanity did. This was not official church doctrine, but it demonstrated a willingness to grapple thoughtfully with questions about life beyond Earth. The Vatican Observatory itself is a remarkable institution, a reminder that the relationship between the Catholic Church and science is more complex than simple opposition. Established in the late 19th century, the observatory conducts genuine astronomical research. Its astronomers have published papers in peer-reviewed journals, contributed to international conferences, collaborated with secular scientists. The observatory's headquarters are now in Castel Gandolfo, the Pope's summer residence, and it operates an advanced telescope in Arizona. Why does the Vatican maintain an observatory? Partly for historical reasons. The Church needed accurate calendar systems, and calendar reform requires astronomical observation. But also because the Church has long maintained that faith and reason are compatible, that understanding the natural world is a way of appreciating God's creation. The Jesuit order, in particular, has produced numerous scientists throughout history, including mathematicians, astronomers, and naturalists who contributed significantly to human knowledge. This tradition sits uneasily with the image of the Vatican as suppressor of truth. It does not mean the Church has never made mistakes or never let theology override empirical observation. But it does suggest an institution more nuanced than the caricature often presented in conspiracy theories. Let us return now to the ancient world, to those clay tablets from Mesopotamia where the Anunnaki first appear in human records. What can we actually know about what the Sumerians, Akkadians, and Babylonians believed? The decipherment of cuneiform was one of the great intellectual achievements of the 19th century. The script had been lost for nearly 2,000 years. The wedge-shaped marks pressed into clay tablets were found at archaeological sites across the Middle East, but no one could read them. Then, beginning in the 1830s and 1840s, scholars began to crack the code. Henry Rawlinson and others worked from the Behistun inscription, a trilingual text carved into a cliff face in Iran. By comparing the known Persian text with the unknown cuneiform, they gradually worked out the system. What they discovered was astonishing. These tablets contained the literature and records of civilizations older than Greece or Rome, older than the Hebrew Bible. Here were law codes that predated Moses, flood myths that paralleled Noah, creation stories that resonated with Genesis. The Epic of Gilgamesh, recovered from the library of the Assyrian king Ashurbanipal in Nineveh, told of a great flood and a man who survived by building a boat, a story that clearly shared roots with the biblical flood narrative. The implications were profound and controversial. If the Babylonians had flood stories before the Hebrews, did that mean the biblical account was borrowed? If creation myths existed in Mesopotamia before Genesis was written, how should this affect understanding of Scripture? These questions sparked intense debate in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, debates that continue in some circles today. Among the texts recovered were king lists, chronicles of rulers stretching back into a mythological past. The Sumerian king list, compiled in the early 2nd millennium BCE but containing traditions from earlier periods, claimed that kingship first descended from heaven, that early kings ruled for fantastically long reigns, tens of thousands of years. Then came the flood, and afterward kingship descended again, with more plausible reign lengths. Scholars recognized this as mythology, a way of thinking about deep time and origins, not literal history. The Anunnaki appear in these texts as part of the divine hierarchy. In the Sumerian cosmos, Anu was the supreme sky god. Enlil was the god of wind and storm. Enki was the god of wisdom and water. The Anunnaki are sometimes identified with these major gods, sometimes as a group of lesser deities, sometimes as judges of the underworld. Their precise identity and function vary from text to text, across centuries and cities, as you would expect in a religious tradition that evolved over thousands of years. One of the most important texts mentioning the Anunnaki is the Atrahasis epic, a Babylonian creation myth from the 18th century BCE. In this story, the gods are divided into two groups, the great gods and the lesser gods. The lesser gods are forced to do backbreaking labor, digging rivers and canals. Eventually they rebel, complaining about their endless toil. The great gods, needing a solution to the labor shortage, decide to create humanity. The goddess Nintu, also called Mami or Bele-Ili, mixes clay with the blood of a slain god, and from this mixture humanity is formed. Here is the passage that has intrigued many readers: humanity is created specifically to bear the burden of the gods, to do the work that the lesser gods no longer wish to do. We are created as laborers, as servants of the divine. This is a very different creation narrative from Genesis, where humanity is created in God's image and given dominion over the earth. In Atrahasis, we are almost an afterthought, a solution to a labor dispute among the gods. Sitchin seized on this narrative, interpreting it through his extraterrestrial lens. The gods who needed workers were aliens. The lesser gods who rebelled were Anunnaki workers in the gold mines. The creation of humanity through mixing clay with divine blood was genetic engineering, combining alien DNA with that of early hominids. The story became evidence for his theories. But scholars of ancient Near Eastern literature read the text very differently. They see it as a mythological explanation for the human condition, for why we labor and toil, why life is hard. It reflects the social realities of ancient Mesopotamia, where ordinary people did indeed labor endlessly. Farming, building, serving the temples and palaces. The myth makes sense of this condition by projecting it into cosmic origins. We work because we were made to work. The gods needed us, and that gives our labor meaning and purpose. Moreover, the language of clay and divine blood fits perfectly within ancient Mesopotamian thinking about creation. Clay was the primordial material, formless and potential. Blood represented life force, vitality, consciousness. The mixing of these elements was a poetic way of describing how inanimate matter becomes living, conscious beings. To read this as literal description of genetic engineering is to impose modern categories onto ancient thought. This is the crucial point that gets lost in ancient astronaut theories. They take texts from a completely different cultural context, from people who thought about the world in ways fundamentally unlike our own, and interpret them using modern scientific and technological frameworks. It is not that the ancient Mesopotamians were stupid or primitive. They were sophisticated thinkers who created literature of profound depth. But they were not writing science fiction or factual reports of extraterrestrial contact. They were creating meaning through myth. The flood story in Atrahasis is similarly revealing. In the epic, humanity multiplies and becomes noisy, disturbing the gods' rest. The god Enlil decides to destroy humanity with a flood. But Enki, who had a role in creating humans, warns a man named Atrahasis, or Utnapishtim in the Gilgamesh version, and tells him to build a boat and save himself, his family, and animals. The flood comes, devastating the world. Afterward, the gods realize they have made a mistake. Without humans, there is no one to make offerings to them, no one to maintain the temples. The gods are hungry, deprived of sacrifice. They gather around the first offering Atrahasis makes after the flood, like flies. This is both humorous and profound. The gods need humans as much as humans need the gods. The relationship is reciprocal, even if unequal. And the flood, rather than being divine punishment for moral failure as in Genesis, is almost petty. The gods are annoyed by noise. The story reflects real flooding in Mesopotamia, where the Tigris and Euphrates periodically overflowed with devastating consequences. But it frames this in terms of divine-human relationship, exploring questions of survival and meaning. When we read these texts carefully, in their original context, they reveal a worldview rich with meaning but quite different from what modern reinterpretation suggests. The Anunnaki were not ancient astronauts. They were gods in a pantheon, part of a complex mythology that helped ancient peoples make sense of their world. But why, then, has the idea of the Anunnaki as extraterrestrials proven so compelling? Why do these theories persist despite scholarly debunking? Part of the answer lies in the very real sense of mystery that ancient civilizations evoke. The Sumerians invented writing, developed mathematics, built cities with sophisticated architecture, created literature of lasting beauty. They did all this more than 5,000 years ago. Standing before their achievements, the ziggurats that still rise from the Iraqi desert, the tablets covered in precise cuneiform, the statues with their wide eyes gazing across millennia, it is easy to feel awe and wonder. How did they do it? How did civilization emerge so fully formed, apparently so quickly? For much of history, these questions had no good answers. Archaeology was young, the ancient languages had only recently been deciphered, the timeline of human development was unclear. Into this gap, theories rushed. Some suggested that Atlantis or some other lost advanced civilization had taught the Sumerians. Others proposed divine intervention. Sitchin offered extraterrestrial benefactors. But as archaeology has advanced, as our understanding of human prehistory has deepened, we have begun to see how civilization actually emerged. Gradually, incrementally, through countless small innovations and adaptations over thousands of years. The Sumerians did not appear from nowhere. They were preceded by the Ubaid culture, and before that by earlier settlements, stretching back through the Neolithic Revolution when humans first began farming, back into the Paleolithic when we were hunter-gatherers developing the cognitive abilities that would eventually lead to civilization. The invention of writing, which seems so miraculous, can now be traced through earlier stages of development. Before cuneiform, there were clay tokens used for accounting, representing numbers of sheep or quantities of grain. These tokens gradually became more standardized, were enclosed in clay envelopes, and eventually the symbols were impressed on the clay surface itself rather than using physical tokens. Writing emerged from bookkeeping, from the practical needs of tracking goods in increasingly complex economies. It was brilliant, but it was human brilliance, not alien technology. Similarly with architecture. The ziggurats were impressive, but they were built using techniques that developed over generations. Earlier cultures built simpler structures. Each generation learned from the previous one, improved techniques, organized labor more effectively. We can trace the evolution of architectural forms, see how one style leads to another. There is no need to invoke extraterrestrial architects. Yet the theories persist, and this brings us back to deeper questions about human nature and belief. We live in an age of scientific materialism, where the official explanations for existence are often impersonal and mechanistic. Evolution operates through random mutation and natural selection. The universe began with a Big Bang, a quantum fluctuation perhaps, expanding and cooling and eventually producing stars and planets and, on at least one planet, life. There is no inherent meaning to any of this, no cosmic purpose. We are, in the famous phrase, just matter in motion. For many people, this worldview is unsatisfying. It feels empty, meaningless. Religion offers an alternative. A personal God who created with intention, who cares about humanity, who offers salvation and eternal life. But traditional religion comes with its own difficulties. Many find its doctrines hard to believe in an age of science. The Bible's miracles seem implausible. Church institutions have been revealed as flawed and sometimes corrupt. For those who have lost traditional faith but still hunger for meaning, for connection to something greater, ancient astronaut theories offer a middle path. These theories preserve a sense of cosmic significance. We were created by advanced beings for a purpose, while seeming more scientifically plausible than traditional religion. Genetic engineering is real. Space travel is real. Advanced technology exists. So perhaps ancient creation stories were not metaphors or myths, but garbled accounts of actual events involving technology. This feels more believable to some than miracles, more satisfying than pure materialism. And the conspiracy element adds another layer of appeal. If the truth is being suppressed by powerful institutions like the Vatican, then believing in the Anunnaki becomes a form of resistance, a way of claiming hidden knowledge that the authorities do not want you to have. It positions the believer as enlightened, as one of the few who see through the official lies. This can be psychologically powerful, providing a sense of importance and insider status. None of this means the theories are true. Psychological appeal does not equal factual accuracy. But it helps explain why these ideas spread and persist despite lack of scholarly support. They fill real emotional and philosophical needs, even if they do so with false information. The Vatican's role in these narratives is largely symbolic. It represents institutional authority, traditional religion, the establishment. Whether the Vatican actually has any special knowledge about the Anunnaki is almost beside the point. The theories need the Vatican to play the role of suppressor, and the Vatican's real characteristics, its ancient archives, its history of sometimes resisting scientific findings, its political power, make it plausible enough to fulfill that narrative function. But let us consider what would actually happen if evidence of extraterrestrial contact with ancient Earth were discovered. Imagine archaeologists found a site in Iraq with technology that could not be explained by any known ancient civilization. Imagine they discovered tablets or artifacts that clearly indicated contact with non-human intelligence. How would this be received? How would the Vatican respond? Based on the Church's historical pattern, there would likely be initial resistance and confusion, followed by a period of theological wrestling, and eventually some form of accommodation. The Church has proven adaptable over its long history. It has survived the discovery that Earth is not the center of the universe, that humanity evolved from other species, that the world is billions of years old rather than thousands. Each of these discoveries required theological adjustment, but the Church persisted and incorporated the new knowledge. If extraterrestrial intelligence were confirmed to exist, Catholic theologians would probably develop frameworks for understanding this within Christian faith. They might argue that God created life on many worlds, that the incarnation of Christ on earth was part of a larger divine plan, that human beings remain spiritually significant even if not cosmically unique. These would be controversial positions, fiercely debated, but they would emerge. Faith would adapt, as it always has. But we are dealing with hypotheticals. No such evidence has been found. The archaeological record shows human civilization developing gradually through human effort. The ancient texts, properly understood in context, describe mythology and religious belief, not encounters with extraterrestrials. The Anunnaki were gods in the minds of ancient Mesopotamians, not aliens in spacecraft. Does this mean there is no mystery left? Does this mean we fully understand ancient civilizations and their beliefs? Not at all. Mystery remains everywhere we look. We have thousands of cuneiform tablets, but we estimate that we have found only a small fraction of what was written. Most ancient documents were written on materials that did not survive: papyrus, leather, wood. What we have are the durable remnants, the clay tablets that happened to be baked hard by fires that destroyed the buildings containing them, the stone inscriptions that weathered millennia. Imagine how much knowledge has been lost, how many stories and ideas and observations vanished when the libraries of the ancient world burned or crumbled into dust. The Library of Alexandria, that legendary repository of ancient knowledge, was gradually destroyed over centuries through neglect, fire, and deliberate destruction. We will never know the full extent of what was lost there. Works by philosophers whose names we know only from references in other texts. Scientific treatises that might have advanced human understanding by centuries if they had survived. Poetry and drama and history from cultures we can now barely glimpse. The loss is incalculable. Mesopotamia suffered similar losses. When the Mongols sacked Baghdad in 1258, destroying the House of Wisdom and throwing countless manuscripts into the Tigris, knowledge accumulated over centuries disappeared in days. Earlier destructions, the countless wars and conquests that swept through the region, each took their toll. The clay tablets survived better than papyrus or parchment, but they too were often destroyed, or buried and scattered, or reused as building material. So yes, mystery remains. There are kings mentioned in fragmentary texts whose lives and deeds we know almost nothing about. There are religious practices hinted at but never fully described. There are words in Sumerian and Akkadian whose meanings we can only guess at. There are tablets that remain untranslated simply because there are not enough scholars with the necessary expertise to work through everything that has been found. But these are human mysteries, puzzles about human history and culture and belief. They do not require extraterrestrial explanations. They simply require patience, careful scholarship, and the humility to admit when we do not know something. The night is deepening now, and perhaps you are growing drowsy. This is as it should be. Let your mind wander gently through what we have explored together. Picture those ancient cities rising from the Mesopotamian plain, their mud brick walls warm in the desert sun. Imagine the scribes bent over their tablets, carefully pressing cuneiform signs into soft clay, recording prayers and contracts and stories that would outlast their civilization. See the priests ascending the ziggurats at dawn, climbing toward the sky, toward the gods they believed dwelt in the heavens above. And picture too the Vatican, that different kind of sacred space, built not in the desert but in the heart of Rome, accumulating over centuries its own layers of history and belief. Imagine the scholars in the apostolic library, turning pages of manuscripts centuries old, breathing carefully to avoid disturbing the fragile vellum. Think of the Vatican astronomers at their telescopes, priests and scientists both, gazing at the same stars the ancient Mesopotamians watched, seeking their own understanding of humanity's place in the vastness of creation. These are both sacred endeavors, the ancient and the modern, the Mesopotamian and the Catholic. Both represent humanity reaching toward something greater, asking questions about origins and meaning and purpose. The forms differ profoundly. The cuneiform tablet and the Latin manuscript, the ziggurat and the basilica, the pantheon of Sumerian gods and the Christian Trinity. But the impulse is recognizable across the millennia. We are a species that seeks meaning, that tells stories to understand ourselves and our world. The Anunnaki, as the ancient Mesopotamians understood them, were part of such a story. They were not ancient astronauts but mythological beings who helped explain the structure of reality, the relationship between divine and human, the reasons for human suffering and labor and mortality. These stories were not failures to understand science. They were different kinds of understanding, ways of encoding wisdom and grappling with existential questions that transcended mere factual description. When we read in Atrahasis that humanity was created from clay mixed with divine blood, we are not reading a garbled account of genetic engineering. We are reading poetry, theology, philosophy. The ancients were saying something profound about human nature, that we are both earthly and divine, matter and spirit, formed from the dust yet animated by something beyond the merely physical. This is not less true for being mythological. It is a different kind of truth, one that speaks to human experience and meaning rather than biological mechanism. The modern reinterpretation of these myths as ancient astronaut narratives is, in a strange way, less imaginative than the original. It reduces poetry to prose, strips away layers of meaning in favor of a single literal interpretation. It asks the ancient texts to be something they were never meant to be, scientific reports, and then claims to find hidden scientific meaning that the authors never intended. There is something poignant in this. We live in an age that has largely lost the ability to think mythologically, to understand that truth can be conveyed through story and symbol without being literally factual. We have trained ourselves to equate truth with scientific fact, to dismiss anything that cannot be empirically verified as false or meaningless. So when we encounter ancient myths, we feel compelled either to defend them as literally true, leading to fundamentalism, or to reinterpret them as garbled history or misunderstood technology, leading to theories like Sitchin's. What we have lost is the middle path, the ability to say, these stories are not literally true, but they are profoundly meaningful. They encode wisdom about the human condition. They help us understand ourselves and our place in the world. They connect us to our ancestors and to each other. They are true in the way that great literature is true, in the way that art is true, not as description of facts, but as revelation of meaning. The Vatican, for all its flaws and failures, has preserved some of this understanding. The Catholic tradition has always maintained, at its best, that Scripture can be read on multiple levels. There is the literal meaning, yes, but also the allegorical, the moral, the anagogical. A biblical story can be historically true or false, but it still conveys theological truth, moral teaching, spiritual insight. This hermeneutic, this way of reading, allows for nuance and depth. Of course, the Church has not always lived up to this principle. There have been times when literal interpretation was insisted upon, when deviation was punished, when the institutional Church prioritized its own authority over truth-seeking. The Galileo affair is the most famous example, but there are others. The Church's treatment of biblical scholars who applied historical critical methods to Scripture, its resistance to scientific findings that challenged traditional interpretations, its sometimes authoritarian suppression of theological exploration, these are real failures that cannot be excused. But they are human failures, the failures of an institution made up of fallible human beings, shaped by historical circumstances and cultural limitations. They do not require conspiracy theories about suppressed knowledge of extraterrestrial contact. The actual failures are bad enough, and more importantly, they are comprehensible. They fit within understandable patterns of institutional behavior, of how organizations protect their authority and resist change. The appeal of conspiracy theories is that they make institutions seem more powerful and more malevolent than they actually are. The real Vatican is a complex bureaucracy, often inefficient, sometimes corrupt, occasionally inspired, usually just muddling through like any other large organization. It has neither the omniscience nor the unified will that conspiracy theories attribute to it. Different factions within the Church disagree about theology, politics, policy. Popes have different priorities and personalities. Cardinals and bishops and priests vary wildly in their beliefs and behaviors. The idea that this sprawling, fractious institution could maintain perfect secrecy about earth-shattering revelations regarding human origins strains credulity. Secrets of far less significance have leaked repeatedly throughout Church history. The Vatican is better at pageantry and continuity than at conspiracy. And yet the speculation continues, wave after wave of theories linking the Vatican to hidden knowledge, to suppressed truths, to cover-ups of everything from extraterrestrial contact to lost gospels to the location of the Ark of the Covenant. Each theory finds an audience, sells books and documentaries, spawns websites and discussion forums. Why? Perhaps because we need there to be secrets. We need to believe that someone, somewhere, knows more than they are telling us. In a world that often feels chaotic and meaningless, the idea that there are hidden truths, suppressed knowledge, conspiracies behind the scenes, this idea is oddly comforting. It suggests that the world makes sense, that there are reasons for things, even if those reasons are being concealed. It is more bearable to believe in a malevolent conspiracy than in pure chaos or meaninglessness. The religious dimension adds another layer. For those who have lost faith in traditional religion but retain a spiritual hunger, the idea that the Church is suppressing evidence about humanity's true origins becomes a way to reject religious authority while maintaining a sense of cosmic significance. It is a form of religious rebellion, of claiming hidden gnosis, secret knowledge, against the official dogma. This is, ironically, a very old religious impulse. The early Christian Church faced numerous Gnostic movements, groups that claimed special secret knowledge about the nature of reality, about humanity's divine origins, about hidden truths that the mainstream Church suppressed. The Nag Hammadi Library, discovered in Egypt in 1945, contained Gospels and texts from these early Gnostic Christians, revealing a whole parallel Christian tradition that was eventually deemed heretical and suppressed. Modern conspiracy theories about the Vatican often have a Gnostic flavor. They promise hidden knowledge, claim that the truth is being suppressed by corrupt authorities, suggest that enlightenment comes from discovering secret information. The content differs, ancient astronauts instead of divine sparks, but the structure is similar. There is truth, there is suppression, and there is the enlightened few who see through the deception. Understanding this psychological pattern does not resolve the question of whether specific claims are true or false. But it does help us approach such claims more thoughtfully, to ask not just, is this true, but why does this claim appeal to people? What needs does it fulfill? What would it mean if it were true, and what would it mean if it were false? If the Anunnaki theories were true, if humanity really were created by ancient extraterrestrials, what would this actually change? Would it make our lives more or less meaningful? Would it answer the fundamental questions that religions attempt to address, why we are here, how we should live, what happens after death? Consider what would still remain mysterious even if we accepted the ancient astronaut narrative. If the Anunnaki created us, who created them? If they evolved on another planet, we have simply pushed the question of origins back one step. Evolution still operates according to natural laws, life still emerges from non-life somehow, consciousness still arises from matter. The fundamental mysteries remain. And the moral questions persist regardless. How should we treat each other? What constitutes a good life? What obligations do we have to future generations? These questions are not answered by knowing whether we were created by God, by evolution, or by alien genetic engineers. They require wisdom, compassion, ethical reasoning. Qualities that transcend our origin story. The Vatican's teachings on these matters do not actually depend on the literal truth of Genesis. Catholic moral theology is based on principles of human dignity, natural law, the example of Christ, the traditions of the Church. Even if tomorrow it were proven that humanity was genetically engineered by extraterrestrials, the core ethical teachings would not necessarily change. The call to love your neighbor, to care for the poor and suffering, to seek justice and peace, these would remain valid regardless of our biological origins. This is perhaps why the Vatican has been able to accommodate scientific findings like evolution. The Church's fundamental mission is not to provide a scientific account of human origins, but to offer a path to salvation, a moral framework, a community of faith. The creation story in Genesis conveys theological truths. That existence is good, that humanity has dignity, that we are called to relationship with God, that can be maintained even if the specific six-day creation narrative is understood as poetry rather than history. Would the Church extend this accommodation to confirmed extraterrestrial contact? We can only speculate, but the groundwork has already been laid. Vatican astronomers and theologians have written thoughtfully about the possibility of extraterrestrial life. They have suggested that the existence of other intelligent beings would not undermine Christian faith but might expand our understanding of God's creative work. Christ's incarnation on earth would remain significant for human salvation, while leaving open the possibility that God relates to other species in other ways. This is quite different from the stance that conspiracy theories attribute to the Vatican. Rather than desperately suppressing evidence that would destroy faith, the actual Vatican seems remarkably open to cosmic possibilities. The restriction is not on ideas but on unfounded speculation presented as fact. And this brings us to an important distinction often lost in these discussions, the difference between possibility and probability, between "we cannot rule this out" and "we should believe this is true." Is it possible that extraterrestrial intelligence exists? Yes. The universe is vast, containing billions of galaxies, each with billions of stars, many with planets. The chemistry of life seems to be based on common elements. The laws of physics that allowed life to emerge on Earth operate throughout the cosmos. It would be strange if Earth were the only planet where life, and intelligent life, ever arose. Is it possible that extraterrestrial intelligence has visited Earth? In principle, yes, though the vast distances between stars make interstellar travel extraordinarily difficult. The nearest star system is over 4 light-years away. Even traveling at a significant fraction of light speed, which would require technology far beyond anything we can currently imagine, such a journey would take years or decades. And there are only a handful of stars within even 100 light-years of Earth. The galaxy is enormous, and the idea that aliens just happened to find our particular planet among countless others requires luck or intention of a very specific kind. Is it possible that such visitation occurred in ancient times and was recorded in Mesopotamian texts? Here possibility becomes extremely remote. If aliens visited Earth, they would have left some physical trace beyond ambiguous literary references. Where are the artifacts made of materials or using techniques unknown to ancient humans? Where are the genetic markers showing artificial manipulation? Where are the archaeological anomalies that cannot be explained by human activity? Every significant human technological achievement leaves evidence. The Romans built roads and aqueducts that still stand. Medieval cathedrals proclaim their builders' engineering prowess. Even much older constructions, like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, a site over 11,000 years old, clearly show human-scale construction techniques. There is nowhere in the archaeological record where we find technology that exceeds what humans of that era could accomplish with enough time, effort, and organization. The ancient achievements that seem most mysterious, the Egyptian pyramids, Stonehenge, the Nazca lines, have all been explained through experimental archaeology and careful analysis. We know how the pyramids were built. With ramps, copper tools, precise planning, and enormous amounts of human labor. We know how Stonehenge was constructed, by moving massive stones over long distances using sledges, rollers, and muscle power. We know the Nazca lines were made by removing surface stones to reveal lighter soil beneath, creating lines and figures visible from above, impressive and mysterious in their purpose perhaps, but not in their method. Ancient people were not primitive or stupid. They were as intelligent as we are, with the same cognitive abilities. What they lacked was accumulated knowledge and technology, but they were brilliant problem solvers who could accomplish extraordinary things with the tools available to them. Attributing their achievements to extraterrestrial intervention is not giving them credit but taking it away. The Anunnaki texts, similarly, make perfect sense as mythology without requiring extraterrestrial explanation. They fit within the broader patterns of ancient Near Eastern religious thought. They address the same themes that myths worldwide address: creation, divine human relationships, the origins of suffering and death, the nature of the cosmos. There is nothing in them that requires us to posit spaceships and genetic engineering. Yet the theories persist, and will likely continue to persist, because they serve psychological and emotional needs that facts alone cannot address. People want wonder. They want significance. They want to feel connected to something larger than mundane existence. Ancient astronaut theories provide these things, even if their foundations are shaky. The question, then, is not simply how to debunk these theories, though that has value, but how to fulfill the legitimate needs they address. How do we restore a sense of wonder and cosmic significance without resorting to unfounded speculation? How do we help people feel connected to the deep past without needing to invent false histories? This is where good history, careful archaeology, and thoughtful science communication become crucial. The true story of human origins and development is genuinely awe-inspiring. We evolved from single-celled organisms over billions of years, through countless generations, each small change building on the previous ones, until eventually consciousness emerged, culture developed, and here we are, capable of looking back and understanding our own history. This is not less wondrous than being created by aliens. It is more wondrous. It means we are connected to every living thing on Earth through deep evolutionary kinship. It means the atoms in our bodies were forged in the hearts of dying stars billions of years ago. It means consciousness, the ability to think and feel and wonder, emerged from the universe's own matter, that the cosmos became aware of itself through us. The development of human civilization is similarly amazing when you really consider it. From the first stone tools millions of years ago, to the controlled use of fire, to the development of language and art and ritual, to the Neolithic Revolution when we learned to farm and settle in one place, to the emergence of cities and writing and mathematics, this is a story of breathtaking creativity and adaptation. The Sumerians did not need alien teachers. They were the inheritors of thousands of years of gradual human innovation. Every technology they developed built on previous knowledge, every cultural achievement emerged from human minds grappling with human challenges. Their gods, including the Anunnaki, were their way of making sense of forces they could not control: the flooding rivers, the unpredictable weather, the mysterious workings of life and death. When we understand this, we do not diminish the Sumerians. We honor them as fully human, as our ancestors in the great project of civilization. We see in their achievements our own potential, recognize in their struggles our own challenges. We are connected to them not through ancient alien intervention but through the continuous thread of human culture and knowledge passed down through generations. And the Vatican, in this understanding, is simply one more link in that chain. It is a repository of human history, human thought, human aspiration, and failure. Its archives contain not suppressed truths about extraterrestrials but the accumulated documentation of human religious experience, of attempts to understand the divine, of political maneuvering and theological debate, of saints and sinners, of moments of grace and moments of corruption. The real Vatican is more interesting than the conspiracy theory version. It is a place where medieval manuscripts sit alongside cutting-edge astronomical research, where ancient ritual coexists with modern theological innovation, where tradition and change exist in constant tension. It is a human institution, with all the grandeur and all the sordidness that entails. Those archives, stretching for miles beneath Vatican City, contain wonders enough without needing to invent secret Sumerian tablets or hidden evidence of ancient astronauts. There are letters from Michelangelo complaining about the difficulty of painting the Sistine Chapel ceiling. There are documents related to the trial of Galileo, showing the human face of that tragic confrontation between science and religious authority. There are records of the complex diplomacy involved in the Crusades, showing how religious fervor mixed with political calculation and economic interest. There are theological treatises grappling with questions that still trouble us. How can evil exist if God is good and all-powerful? How should Christians respond to violence and persecution? What is the relationship between faith and reason? These documents show brilliant minds wrestling with profound questions, not always finding satisfying answers but refusing to stop asking. There are records of church councils where doctrine was debated and decided, showing that what we now think of as unchanging tradition was often contested and contingent, shaped by specific historical circumstances and power dynamics. There are accounts of missions to distant lands, some showing genuine attempts at spreading faith, others revealing colonialism and cultural destruction. All of this is the true treasure of the Vatican archives. Not alien secrets, but human history in all its complexity. It is messy and contradictory, inspiring and troubling, exactly what you would expect from 2,000 years of human religious experience documented in detail. For a scholar, gaining access to these archives is a dream. Imagine being allowed into those climate-controlled rooms, opening volumes that few people have examined in centuries, reading words written by hands that turned to dust long ago. Imagine tracing the evolution of an idea across centuries of correspondence, or discovering a previously unknown detail about a historical event, or finding a personal letter that reveals the human face behind a famous saint or pope. This is the real excitement of historical research, the genuine wonder of connecting with the past. It does not require conspiracies or cover-ups. It simply requires patience, skill, and reverence for the documents themselves. And what these documents reveal, consistently, is human beings trying to make sense of existence, trying to live meaningful lives, trying to connect with something greater than themselves. The forms change across time and culture, the Sumerian priest offering sacrifices at the ziggurat, the medieval monk copying manuscripts by candlelight, the modern Vatican astronomer analyzing data from telescopes in Arizona, but the fundamental human impulse remains constant. We want to know where we came from. We want to understand our purpose. We want to believe that existence is meaningful, that our lives matter in some cosmic sense. Religion is one way humans have addressed these needs. Mythology is another. Science offers its own answers. And theories about ancient astronauts, for all their factual shortcomings, represent yet another attempt to fulfill these deep human longings. The challenge is to find ways to address these needs that are both emotionally satisfying and intellectually honest. We do not serve anyone by promoting false histories, even if they provide comfort or excitement. But we also fail people if we offer only dry facts without wonder, only mechanism without meaning. Good history writing should inspire or add human achievement while remaining grounded in evidence. Good science communication should convey the genuine wonder of the cosmos without needing to exaggerate or invent. Good theology should grapple honestly with difficult questions while maintaining space for mystery and transcendence. The Vatican, at its best, has contributed to all three of these endeavors. Vatican scholars have done serious historical research. Vatican astronomers have contributed to scientific knowledge. Vatican theologians have written thoughtfully about faith in dialogue with reason. These contributions are real and valuable, even if the institution has also made serious mistakes and committed genuine sins. Conspiracy theories about the Vatican and the Anunnaki, by contrast, contribute little of value. They do not advance historical understanding. They misrepresent ancient texts. They distract from the genuine questions we should be asking about human origins, consciousness, meaning, and purpose. They offer false certainty in place of honest uncertainty, conspiracy in place of complexity. But perhaps that is too harsh. Perhaps even false theories serve a purpose by keeping certain questions alive, by refusing to accept simple answers, by maintaining a sense that there might be more to existence than we currently understand. The specific claims about ancient astronauts may be wrong, but the impulse behind them, the refusal to accept that we fully understand ourselves and our history, has some validity. We do not fully understand consciousness. We do not fully understand how life began. We do not fully understand why the universe exists rather than nothing. We do not fully understand what, if anything, might lie beyond the physical realm we can measure and observe. These are genuine mysteries, and it is okay to acknowledge them without rushing to fill the gaps with unfounded speculation. The Sumerians looked at the sky and saw gods. We look at the sky and see nuclear fusion in distant suns, galaxies receding from us as space itself expands, the cosmic microwave background radiation echo of the universe's birth. Our understanding is vastly more detailed, based on extraordinary technologies and centuries of observation and theory building. But we still do not fully understand why there is something rather than nothing, or whether our universe is all that exists, or what consciousness truly is. The Vatican looks at the same sky, literally, through its telescopes, and sees the handiwork of a creator, a cosmos ordered by divine reason, a universe whose existence poses questions that science alone cannot answer. This is a different kind of looking, based on faith and theological tradition rather than empirical observation. But it addresses questions that remain even after all the scientific questions are answered. And ordinary people, looking at that same sky, might see beauty, might feel small, might wonder about their place in the vastness, might imagine what else might be out there. These are human responses, neither purely scientific nor purely religious, but something more basic: wonder, awe, curiosity, the sense that existence is strange and marvelous. The theories about the Anunnaki, whatever their factual accuracy, emerge from this basic human response to existence. They represent an attempt to make sense of our strangeness, to explain why we seem so different from other animals, to account for our consciousness and creativity and our drive to build and explore and question. The specific answer they propose, ancient genetic engineering by extraterrestrials, may be wrong, but the questions that drive the search are worth taking seriously. Where did human consciousness come from? How did we develop language, art, religion, science? Why do we alone among Earth species build civilizations and wonder about our origins? These are profound questions, and while science has partial answers, evolutionary pressures favored larger brains, social cooperation required communication, consciousness emerged from neural complexity, these answers somehow feel incomplete. They describe mechanism but struggle with meaning. Religion offers meaning but struggles with mechanism. It says we are created with purpose, made in the divine image, chosen for relationship with God. This provides existential satisfaction but raises questions about how the creation occurred, about how to reconcile religious narratives with scientific findings, about what it means to be made in God's image when we know we share ancestry with chimpanzees and all living things. Ancient astronaut theories attempt to bridge this gap, to provide both mechanism and meaning. They offer a creation story that sounds plausibly scientific, genetic engineering, while preserving the notion of intentional design and cosmic significance, but this bridge is built on unstable ground, on misread texts and misunderstood archaeology. It collapses under scrutiny, and those who have crossed it find themselves stranded between worlds. Having abandoned both scientific rigor and religious tradition in favor of something that provides neither the certainty of evidence nor the depth of faith. The night deepens further still, and somewhere in this quiet hour, between waking and sleeping, we might ask ourselves what we truly seek when we reach for these stories. Is it knowledge we want, or is it connection? Is it facts we need, or is it meaning? Perhaps both, perhaps neither, perhaps something we do not yet have words to name. The ancient Mesopotamians understood something we have partly forgotten in our age of specialization and expertise. They knew that truth speaks in many voices, that the language of fact and the language of meaning need not be enemies. When they wrote that Anu gave kingship to humanity, when they described Enlil's storm winds sweeping across the land, when they told of Inanna descending to the underworld and returning transformed, they were not attempting scientific description. They were encoding wisdom about power and nature and death and renewal in the only forms available to them, stories of gods whose actions shaped the world. These stories worked. They helped people make sense of existence. They provided frameworks for understanding suffering and joy, for organizing societies, for marking the seasons and the passages of human life. They were true in the way that mattered most. They were useful, meaningful, life-giving. We have gained much in learning to distinguish between mythological truth and empirical fact. We can now cure diseases those ancient peoples could only pray about. We can predict eclipses they feared as omens. We can communicate across distances that would have seemed magical to them. This is genuine progress, built on the rigorous application of empirical methods and logical reasoning. But we have also lost something in drawing such sharp boundaries between the factual and the meaningful, the objective and the subjective, the scientific and the spiritual. We have lost the ability to hold both at once, to let poetry and precision coexist, to honor what we can measure without dismissing what we can only feel. The Vatican, for all its institutional problems, has tried to maintain this balance. It has preserved not only theological texts but also art and music, architecture and ritual, ways of approaching truth that bypass pure reason and speak directly to human experience. When you stand beneath the dome of St. Peter's, when light streams through stained glass and organ music fills vast spaces, when incense rises and ancient words are chanted, something happens that cannot be reduced to neural chemistry or cultural conditioning. There is meaning there, whether or not you believe in the doctrines being expressed. Similarly, when you hold a clay tablet from ancient Mesopotamia, when you see the precise wedge marks pressed by a scribe 4,000 years dead, when you sound out the Sumerian words and realize you are speaking a language that once filled market squares and temple courtyards, there is connection across time that transcends mere historical interest. You are touching something human and timeless, joining a conversation that stretches back to the beginning of writing itself. This is the real magic, the genuine mystery, not ancient astronauts or Vatican conspiracies, but the simple astonishing fact that we can reach across millennia and understand each other. The scribe who wrote that tablet was human like us. They felt joy and sorrow, loved and feared, wondered about the stars and worried about the harvest. They told stories to their children, mourned their dead, hoped for better futures. And we can know this, can feel it, because we are human like them. The Anunnaki, as they understood them, were part of the story they told themselves about why the world was the way it was. Why did the rivers flood unpredictably? The gods decreed it. Why did people have to work so hard? We were created to serve the divine. Why did civilizations rise and fall? The gods gave kingship and took it away. These were not bad answers for a people without meteorology or evolutionary biology or political science. They were attempts to make meaning from experience, to find patterns in chaos, to assert that existence was not random but purposeful. We tell ourselves different stories now, use different frameworks to make sense of existence. We speak of economic forces and climate patterns, of psychological drives and social structures. We have replaced gods with impersonal processes, divine will with natural law. This has given us tremendous power to predict and manipulate the world. But it has not resolved the fundamental questions of meaning and purpose. Why does the universe exist? Science can trace its history back to the Big Bang but cannot explain why there is something rather than nothing. Evolution explains how life diversified but not why matter organized itself into living things in the first place. Neuroscience can map consciousness to brain states but cannot fully explain why physical processes give rise to subjective experience. These limits are not failures of science. They are acknowledgments of science's proper scope. Science is extraordinarily powerful within its domain, the realm of what can be observed, measured, tested, falsified. But there are questions that lie outside this domain, questions about value and meaning and purpose that cannot be resolved by empirical investigation. This is where religion has traditionally operated, in the space between what we can know and what we need to believe in order to live meaningful lives. And the Vatican, as one of religion's most enduring institutional expressions, represents humanity's stubborn refusal to accept that existence is meaningless, that consciousness is accidental, that love and beauty and truth are just evolutionary adaptations with no deeper significance. You do not have to accept Catholic doctrine to appreciate this stubborn insistence on meaning. You do not have to believe in papal infallibility or transubstantiation or the virgin birth to recognize that the questions religion asks, how should we live, what do we owe each other, what happens when we die, are questions that matter, that science alone cannot answer. The conspiracy theories that swirl around the Vatican, including those linking it to the Anunnaki, often miss this deeper truth. They focus on what the Vatican might be hiding, what secrets might be locked in those archives, what suppressed knowledge might undermine religious authority. But the real story is more subtle and more interesting. The Vatican is not hiding evidence that would destroy faith. It is holding space for faith in an age that increasingly has no room for it. It is maintaining traditions that stretch back through centuries, connecting the present to the deep past in ways that secular modernity often cannot. It is insisting, against the prevailing scientific materialism, that existence has meaning beyond mere survival and reproduction, that human beings are not just clever apes but creatures with spiritual dimension and cosmic significance. This insistence may be right or wrong, that is a question each person must answer for themselves. But it is not trivial, and it cannot be replaced by ancient astronaut theories or any other pseudoscientific substitute. If the Vatican is wrong about God, if there is no transcendent reality beyond the physical universe, then we are left with the full weight of cosmic meaninglessness. No amount of speculation about ancient aliens will change that. Conversely, if there is transcendent meaning, if consciousness and value and purpose are woven into the fabric of reality, then this changes everything regardless of whether we were created by divine fiat or by evolutionary processes or even by extraterrestrial genetic engineers. The mechanism of our origin matters less than the question of whether existence itself is meaningful. The Sumerians believed it was meaningful. They saw the world as alive with divine presence, every river and storm and harvest as evidence of the gods' continuing involvement in creation. The Anunnaki were part of this living cosmos, beings who bridged heaven and earth, who carried messages and made judgments, who reminded humanity that we exist within a larger order. The medieval Christians who built the great cathedrals believed existence was meaningful. They poured centuries of labor into creating spaces that would lift the soul toward God, that would teach the illiterate faithful through stone and glass and color, that would endure as testimony to something beyond mere survival. Every arch and buttress, every stained glass window and carved portal, was theology made tangible. The modern Vatican astronomers believe existence is meaningful. They study the heavens with the best instruments science can provide, but they do so as an act of worship, as a way of reading the book of nature that complements the book of Scripture. They see no contradiction between the Big Bang and creation, between evolution and divine purpose. They are comfortable holding both scientific knowledge and religious faith simultaneously. This intellectual both and rather than either-or is perhaps the Vatican's most valuable contribution to these debates about origins and meaning. Against the rigid materialism that insists only the measurable is real, and against the rigid fundamentalism that denies scientific findings, the Vatican at its best offers a third way, faith informed by reason, tradition in dialogue with discovery, transcendence that embraces rather than rejects empirical truth. This is not perfect. The dialogue is often difficult. Individual church leaders sometimes fail to live up to this ideal. There are still tensions between what science discovers and what doctrine teaches. But the attempt itself is valuable, the refusal to choose between Newton and the Nicene Creed, between Darwin and the divine. Ancient astronaut theories, by contrast, offer only confusion, pseudoscience masquerading as revelation, speculation presented as suppressed truth. They do not advance our understanding of the past. They do not help us live better in the present. They do not illuminate the questions that truly matter about meaning and purpose and human flourishing. Yet people believe them, and we cannot simply dismiss these believers as foolish or ignorant. They are often intelligent, thoughtful people who have legitimate reasons for being dissatisfied with both religious fundamentalism and scientific materialism. They are seeking something that makes sense of the world while preserving wonder and significance. The challenge, then, is to offer better alternatives, ways of thinking about human origins and cosmic meaning that are both intellectually honest and emotionally satisfying. This requires bridging disciplines that too often remain separate, bringing together the insights of science and history and philosophy and theology, allowing them to speak to each other rather than talking past each other. It requires scientists who can communicate not just facts but wonder, who can convey the genuine astonishment of discovering that we are made of stardust, that the atoms in our bodies were forged in supernovas billions of years ago, that we are the universe becoming conscious of itself. It requires historians who can make the past come alive, who can help us feel our connection to ancient peoples not as primitive precursors but as fully human ancestors whose achievements deserve our respect and whose wisdom might still teach us something. It requires philosophers who can grapple with questions of meaning and value without dismissing them as meaningless or subjective, who can take seriously the human need for purpose while subjecting proposed answers to rigorous examination. And it requires religious thinkers who can maintain faith while engaging honestly with scientific findings, who can read ancient scriptures as wisdom literature without needing every word to be literally true, who can find God in evolution and the Big Bang rather than only in miracles and interventions. The Vatican has sometimes succeeded at this synthesis and sometimes failed. The same institution that persecuted Galileo later acknowledged its error. The same church that initially resisted evolution later accepted it. The trajectory, however halting and imperfect, has been toward greater openness to scientific discovery, greater willingness to interpret scripture non-literally, greater comfort with mystery and uncertainty. If the Vatican were to encounter definitive evidence of extraterrestrial intelligence, not ancient astronaut speculation but actual contact with beings from another world, the initial shock would be profound. But based on the Church's historical pattern, based on the work its astronomers and theologians have already done thinking about this possibility, the ultimate response would likely be theological adaptation rather than suppression. The Church would find a way to incorporate this new knowledge, would develop frameworks for understanding extraterrestrial intelligence within Christian cosmology. It has survived the discovery that Earth is not the center of the universe, that humanity emerged through natural processes, that the cosmos is billions of years old and unimaginably vast. It would survive this too, would find ways to maintain that existence is meaningful even if we are not alone, that God's creative work might be larger than we imagined, that salvation history as understood through Christian tradition remains valid even in a cosmos populated by many intelligent species. But we are still dealing in hypotheticals. No such evidence exists. The Anunnaki remain what they have always been, gods in ancient Mesopotamian mythology, not extraterrestrial geneticists. The cuneiform tablets, properly translated, tell us about Sumerian religious beliefs, not about ancient astronauts. The archaeological record shows human civilization developing through human effort, innovation building on innovation across millennia. The Vatican's archives contain human history, not suppressed evidence of cosmic secrets. They hold documents that illuminate 2,000 years of Christian tradition in all its complexity, its heights of spiritual insight and artistic achievement, its depths of corruption and violence, its ongoing struggle to understand what it means to be human in relationship with the divine. This is the story we have, the history that actually happened. It is rich enough, strange enough, meaningful enough without needing to be embellished with ancient astronauts or suppressed knowledge. The real mystery is not whether aliens created us but how we created ourselves, how matter organized into life, how life developed consciousness, how consciousness gave rise to language and art and science and religion, how we became beings capable of asking where we came from and why we are here. These questions remain open. We have partial answers, frameworks that illuminate aspects of the mystery, but no complete explanation that accounts for everything. And perhaps this is as it should be. Perhaps the human condition is to live within this tension between what we know and what we wonder, between fact and meaning, between the empirical and the transcendent. The Mesopotamians lived in this tension, their daily lives governed by practical concerns, farming, trade, governance. While their imagination soared into cosmic realms where gods shaped destinies. The medieval monks lived in it too, copying manuscripts and praying the hours, maintaining both intellectual discipline and mystical practice. The Vatican astronomers live in it still, analyzing data and celebrating Mass, studying the heavens scientifically while believing in heaven theologically. And we live in it, all of us, whether we acknowledge it or not. We are material beings subject to physical laws, yet we experience consciousness and agency. We are products of evolutionary processes, yet we create art and philosophy. We are mortal and finite, yet we conceive of infinity and eternity. We are, in ways that still puzzle us deeply, both matter and spirit, mechanism and meaning, flesh and transcendence. The theories about the Anunnaki, the speculation about Vatican secrets, the conspiracy theories that link ancient gods to modern institutions. All of this is symptoms of our discomfort with this fundamental tension. We want clear answers. We want to resolve the ambiguity. We want to know definitively where we came from, whether we are alone, what our purpose is. But clear answers may not be available. The universe may be more mysterious than our theories can capture, human existence more complex than our frameworks can fully explain. And perhaps rather than reaching for false certainties, whether religious fundamentalism or scientific materialism or ancient astronaut pseudoscience, we should learn to live more comfortably with mystery. This does not mean abandoning the search for knowledge. Science should continue investigating the origins of life and consciousness. History should keep piecing together the human past from whatever evidence survives. Philosophy should keep probing questions of meaning and value. Theology should keep exploring humanity's relationship with the transcendent. But it means approaching these investigations with humility, acknowledging the limits of our knowledge, being willing to say, "I don't know," rather than filling gaps with speculation or dogma. It means being comfortable with provisional answers, with frameworks that illuminate without fully explaining, with truths that are partial and perspectival rather than absolute and complete. The Vatican, despite its claims to doctrinal certainty, has in practice often operated with more flexibility than its official stance suggests. Different theologians have proposed different interpretations. Different periods have emphasized different aspects of tradition. The Church has changed its mind about slavery, about religious liberty, about the relationship between church and state, about the dignity of human conscience. It has done so slowly, often belatedly, sometimes under external pressure rather than internal insight. But it has changed, adapting to new circumstances and new understanding while maintaining continuity with its tradition. This capacity for change within continuity, for holding fast to core commitments while adjusting peripheral positions, is perhaps the Vatican's real genius. It allows the institution to endure across centuries of upheaval. It permits dialogue with modernity without complete surrender to it. It creates space for both tradition and innovation, authority and freedom, faith and reason. The Anunnaki, meanwhile, remain what they were in the beginning, mythological figures, products of ancient imagination, attempts to make sense of forces beyond human control. They were never extraterrestrials. They were never genetic engineers. They were gods, and gods are symbols that point towards something real even when they themselves are not literally real. What is that something they point toward? Perhaps the sense that we are embedded in a larger order, that forces beyond our individual control shape our lives, that existence has meaning and structure even when we cannot fully grasp it. The ancient Mesopotamians expressed this through pantheons and myths, through rituals and temples. We express it differently, through scientific theories and philosophical systems, through art and literature and still, for many, through religious practice. But the fundamental human situation remains unchanged. We are conscious beings trying to understand our existence, meaning-making creatures seeking patterns in what otherwise seems chaotic, mortals yearning for connection with something that transcends our brief lives. The Sumerian scribe pressing cuneiform into clay, the medieval monk illuminating manuscripts, the modern physicist working out equations describing the universe's beginning, the Vatican archivist cataloging ancient documents, the conspiracy theorist posting about suppressed knowledge online, all are engaged in the same basic human project, trying to understand, trying to connect, trying to matter. Some approaches are more fruitful than others. Some lead toward genuine knowledge while others lead into confusion. But even the confused seekers deserve compassion rather than contempt. They are trying to answer questions that we all, at some level, carry, questions about origins and purpose and destiny, questions that science addresses but does not fully answer, questions that religion engages but cannot definitively resolve. On this quiet night, as you rest in whatever corner of the world you inhabit, let yourself feel the strange wonder of existing at all. You are made of atoms forged in stars that died before Earth formed. You carry DNA that connects you to the first living cells billions of years ago. Your consciousness emerged from evolutionary processes we still do not fully understand. You are heir to cultural knowledge accumulated over thousands of generations. The ancient Sumerians who first wrote about the Anunnaki would have found your world incomprehensible, machines that fly through the air, images transmitted across continents instantly, medicines that cure diseases they thought were divine punishment, knowledge of the cosmos that dwarfs anything they imagined. Yet you would recognize their essential humanity. They loved and feared, hoped and despaired, wondered and worshipped, just as you do. The Vatican, across its 2,000 years, has witnessed transformations as profound as anything the Sumerians could have imagined. It has seen empires rise and fall, technologies come and go, ideas born and die. It has made peace with some changes and resisted others. It has been agent and witness to history, shaping events and being shaped by them. Through all this, it has maintained its core claim: that existence is meaningful, that human beings have dignity and purpose, that there is something transcendent that calls to us. You need not accept Catholic doctrine to recognize that this claim matters, that how we answer it shapes how we live. If existence is ultimately meaningless, if we are accidents of chemistry with no cosmic significance, then while we might still create meaning for ourselves, might still love and create and find joy, we do so against the backdrop of ultimate futility. Nothing we do finally matters because we and all we create will eventually dissolve into the heat death of an expanding universe. If existence is meaningful, if consciousness and value are real features of the cosmos rather than accidents, then everything changes. Then how we live matters absolutely. Then love and truth and beauty are not just evolutionary adaptations but responses to something real and transcendent. Then death is not simply cessation but perhaps transition. The Vatican says existence is meaningful because God created with purpose and cares about creation. Science says existence may or may not be meaningful, the question lies outside its scope, though the universe it reveals is extraordinary regardless. Philosophy debates whether meaning is objective or subjective, intrinsic or constructed. And the theories about ancient astronauts try to split the difference, to provide meaning through intentional creation while making it sound scientific and technological. But this compromise satisfies neither the demands of evidence nor the depths of spiritual longing. If we want both, if we want understanding grounded in evidence and meaning that touches the soul, we must do the harder work of integration. We must learn to read ancient myths appreciatively without taking them literally. We must study the universe scientifically while remaining open to wonder. We must engage religious tradition critically while respecting its wisdom. We must think clearly without losing our capacity for reverence. This is difficult. It requires holding tensions that our minds want to resolve. It means being comfortable with uncertainty about ultimate questions while remaining committed to discovering what we can know. It means distinguishing between questions that have answers we might find and questions that may be unanswerable, at least with the tools we currently possess. The question of whether the Anunnaki were ancient astronauts is, in principle, answerable. We can examine the archaeological evidence, translate the texts carefully, compare claims to what we actually know about ancient Mesopotamia. The answer, based on all available evidence, is no. They were mythological beings, not extraterrestrials. The question of whether the Vatican is hiding evidence of ancient astronaut contact is also answerable, and the answer is almost certainly no. Nothing in the historical record, nothing in the documented contents of church archives, nothing in the behavior of the institution supports such claims. But the question of whether existence is meaningful, whether consciousness has cosmic significance, whether there is something transcendent that gives purpose to human life. These questions lie deeper, beyond what archaeology or historical research can definitively resolve. Here we must think carefully, weigh different possibilities, examine our own experience, and ultimately make choices about what we believe and how we will live. The Vatican has made its choice, has committed to a particular set of answers rooted in Christian tradition. Others make different choices, embrace different frameworks. Secular humanism, Buddhism, Islam, philosophical naturalism, countless others. Still others remain uncertain, seeking but not finding, wondering but not knowing. There is no shame in uncertainty. There is no weakness in acknowledging mystery. The universe is vast and strange, and we are finite beings with limited perspectives. That we understand as much as we do is remarkable. That questions remain is inevitable. What matters is how we proceed in the face of uncertainty. Do we reach for false certainties, embracing claims that comfort us even when evidence is lacking? Do we become cynical, dismissing all attempts at meaning as delusion? Or do we maintain both critical thinking and openness, both rigor and wonder, both skepticism toward unfounded claims and receptivity to genuine mystery? This last path is hardest but most rewarding. It requires intellectual humility and emotional courage. It means being willing to be wrong, to change our minds when evidence demands it, to hold our beliefs lightly enough that we can examine them honestly. It also means refusing to dismiss what we cannot measure, honoring the full range of human experience including those aspects that resist reduction to data and equations. The ancient Mesopotamians, had they encountered a modern skeptic, might have asked, "If you do not believe in the gods, how do you explain the thunder, the flood, the harvest? If you have no myths, what stories do you tell to make sense of suffering and death? If you see no divine purpose in human existence, how do you bear the weight of consciousness?" These are fair questions. The answers we moderns give: meteorology explains thunder, hydrology explains floods, agronomy explains harvests. We create our own meaning, we bear consciousness through philosophy and community and love. These answers may be factually superior, but they are not necessarily more comforting or more useful for living. The Vatican, standing between ancient and modern worldviews, tries to maintain that we can have both. Can understand the natural world scientifically while also experiencing it as creation, can appreciate evolution while also believing humans have special dignity, can accept death's finality in physical terms while hoping for resurrection in spiritual terms. This synthesis is logically coherent even if not provable. There is no necessary contradiction between scientific understanding and religious faith, though there are tensions that require careful negotiation. Evolution and creation are not enemies if creation is understood theologically rather than literally scientifically. The Big Bang and Genesis do not conflict if Genesis is read as theology rather than cosmology. But many people find such nuanced readings unsatisfying. They want clear, simple answers. They want religious texts to be either completely true in a literal sense or completely false. They want science either to provide all answers including meaning and purpose, or to be rejected as materialist ideology. The middle ground, where different kinds of truth coexist and different forms of knowledge address different questions, requires a sophistication of thought that our culture often does not cultivate. Into this gap, conspiracy theories flow. They offer the appealing simplicity of hidden truth, of knowledge suppressed by authorities, of secret connections that explain everything. They provide the satisfaction of having special knowledge, of being among the enlightened few who see through official deceptions. They give people a sense of control and understanding in a world that often feels chaotic and incomprehensible. The theories linking the Vatican and the Anunnaki combine multiple appeals. They offer ancient wisdom, cosmic significance, technological sophistication, religious conspiracy, and the promise that we are not alone in the universe. They suggest that behind the confusing surface of reality lies a simple, dramatic truth: we were created by aliens, and the church knows but won't tell us. This is emotionally compelling even when intellectually bankrupt. And perhaps the proper response is not just debunking but understanding. Recognizing what needs these theories meet and finding better ways to address those needs. People need connection to the past. Give them real history, vividly told, that shows human achievement across millennia without needing alien intervention. People need cosmic significance. Help them see the genuine wonder in being conscious matter, in carrying 4 billion years of evolutionary history in their DNA, in being the universe's way of knowing itself. People need meaning and purpose. Support them in creating meaningful lives through relationships, through work that matters, through connection to something larger than individual existence, whether that something is conceived religiously or secularly. People need mystery and wonder. Show them the genuine mysteries that remain unsolved, the origin of life, the nature of consciousness, the question of whether we are alone in the cosmos, without filling those mysteries with unfounded speculation. People need honest engagement with their questions. Take seriously their doubts about official narratives, their hunger for knowledge, their suspicion of authority, but channel these impulses toward critical thinking rather than conspiracy theory. The Vatican, whatever its faults, has preserved something valuable across 2 millennia, a tradition of grappling with ultimate questions, a community of faith and practice, an insistence that human life has transcended dimension and cosmic worth. These contributions should not be dismissed simply because the institution has also made mistakes and sometimes resisted truth. Similarly, the ancient Mesopotamians bequeathed to us something precious: the invention of writing, the development of mathematics and astronomy, literature that still moves us, myths that still resonate. Their gods, including the Anunnaki, were their way of engaging with mystery and meaning. We dishonor them when we reduce their rich mythology to crude accounts of alien contact. As this long night draws toward its close, as your consciousness perhaps drifts between waking and dreaming, let these thoughts settle gently into whatever understanding you carry. There are no alien creators hiding in ancient texts. There are no Vatican conspiracies suppressing cosmic truths. But there is mystery enough in what we know, wonder enough in what we are, meaning enough in how we live. You are stardust contemplating stars. Hydrogen atoms become conscious of their own existence, patterns of energy that somehow experience joy and sorrow, love and loss, wonder and confusion. The ancient Sumerians felt what you feel, feared what you fear, hoped what you hope. The scholars in the Vatican's archives, surrounded by centuries of accumulated wisdom and folly, struggle with questions you struggle with. We are all in this together. Ancient and modern, religious and secular, certain and doubting. We are all trying to understand, all seeking meaning, all living within the strange condition of being conscious beings aware of our own mortality yet reaching toward transcendence. The universe is billions of years old and vastly larger than human comprehension. Galaxies beyond counting will through space at speeds that make a mockery of our earthbound experience. Stars are born and die in processes that dwarf any human drama. Yet here you are, improbably, impossibly, existing and aware. That is the real miracle, the genuine mystery worth contemplating. Not ancient astronauts. Not suppressed Vatican secrets. But the sheer, astonishing fact of consciousness emerging from matter, of meaning arising in a universe that might have contained nothing, of love flowering between finite beings in an infinite cosmos. The Anunnaki were humanity's early attempt to name the forces we sensed but could not explain. The Vatican is humanity's ongoing attempt to maintain connection with something transcendent. Science is humanity's systematic effort to understand the natural world. Philosophy is humanity's wrestle with questions of meaning and value. All of these are human projects, products of our unique consciousness, our capacity to ask why and how and what if. None provides complete answers. Each illuminates part of the mystery. Together they sketch the outline of what we know and what we wonder, mapping both our knowledge and our ignorance. As you drift towards sleep, if sleep is what you seek, or as you rest in quiet wakefulness if that is where you find yourself, know that you are part of an ancient conversation. The questions you carry, others have carried before you. The wonder you feel, others have felt across millennia. The meaning you seek, others seek alongside you. There are no secret texts that will resolve all questions. There are no suppressed truths that will make everything clear. There is only the patient work of learning what we can, the humble acknowledgement of what we cannot know, and the courageous choice to live meaningfully despite uncertainty. The Vatican's domes catch the Roman dawn. Somewhere in its archives, documents sleep that tell human stories across centuries. In Iraq, clay tablets lie beneath desert sand, waiting to be discovered or already resting in museums, their cuneiform signs holding Sumerian words about gods who once explained the world. Above both, the same stars shine that the ancient astronomers watched, that modern physicists measure, that ordinary people sometimes pause to wonder at. And you, reading or listening to these words, are connected to all of it. To the ancient scribes and modern scholars, to the questions and the seeking, to the vast cosmos and the intimate experience of being alive. You do not need alien creators to be significant. You do not need Vatican conspiracies to find meaning. You need only open yourself to the genuine mysteries that surround us, the real wonders that pervade existence, the authentic connections that make us human. Rest now, if rest is what you need. Let the questions settle without needing answers. Let the stories, ancient and modern, mythological and historical, scientific and theological, weave together into whatever understanding serves your life. Let yourself be both skeptical and open, both critical and receptive, both grounded and reaching. The Anunnaki watch no longer from Mesopotamian skies. The Vatican keeps no secrets that would overturn the world. But existence remains mysterious and marvelous, consciousness continues to be strange and precious, and the human journey, from ancient Sumer to modern Rome to wherever you are now, continues its slow unfolding toward destinations we cannot yet imagine. May you find rest in uncertainty, peace in mystery, and meaning in the simple fact of being alive, aware, and connected across time and space to all who have wondered, all who have sought, all who have lived this strange and beautiful human life. The night embraces us all. Ancient scribes and modern scholars, religious faithful and secular seekers, the certain and the doubting. In this shared darkness, we are all fellow travelers, all wondering about the same stars, all seeking our way home. And perhaps that seeking is itself the point, the journey more valuable than any destination. Perhaps the questions matter more than the answers, the wondering more than the knowing, the reaching more than the grasping. Sleep well, dear friend, wherever in this wide world you find yourself. Let history and mystery, science and story, fact and faith all find their place in the vast landscape of human understanding. And when you wake, may you greet the day with curiosity renewed, with wonder preserved, with the courage to keep seeking truth while honoring mystery. For we are all, every one of us, children of the cosmos learning to understand ourselves, finite beings reaching toward infinity, dust and divinity mysteriously combined in the fleeting, precious, inexplicable experience of being human and alive and aware. The ancient Mesopotamians knew this. The Vatican proclaims it. Science reveals it. And you, in your own unique way, live it. That is enough. That is everything. That is the story worth telling, the truth worth seeking, the mystery worth honoring as this quiet night releases us toward whatever tomorrow brings. Rest now. Wonder gently. And know that you are part of something larger than conspiracy or certainty, deeper than facts or fictions, older than civilization and as new as your next breath, the ongoing human journey into understanding, meaning, and connection across the vast spaces and deep times that comprise our shared existence. Good night, dear friend. May you find peace in questions without answers, comfort in mysteries beyond solving, and joy in simply being part of this extraordinary, unlikely, beautiful cosmic story we are all living together. The stars continue their ancient dance. The archives hold their patient silence. The tablets rest in their cases. And you, wonderfully, improbably, impossibly, exist. Conscious and questioning, seeking and resting, awake and dreaming, now and always, part of everything that was and is and yet shall be.